The
I
portrait hung in the
understand this is
main hall of the
difficult, but
officers'
the
club,
language in the will
where
is
they
quite
held Richard's
specific
memorial
regarding the
reception.
distribution of the assets.
Admiral Richard Whitmore in his dress whites, medals gleaming like small suns across his chest. His daughter Sophia stood beside him in the painting, wearing her Yale Law graduation gown. His son Marcus on the other side, fresh from his first partnership at Morrison and Blake. And there, barely visible in the background, soft-focused and slightly translucent, as if the artist wasn't quite sure I belonged in the frame at all, was me. Elena Whitmore, wife of 34 years, mother of no one, the woman who'd raised his children after their mother died, the woman who'd stood beside him through 3 deployments, 4 promotions, and countless Navy functions. The woman everyone called Quiet Elena or Sweet Elena or, when they thought I couldn't hear, that mousy second wife. What they didn't know was that the mousy second wife owned the building we were standing in. The officers' club was mine. I'd bought it 3 years ago when the Navy put it up for private sale. $8.7 million, paid in cash. And that was just the beginning. I stood beside the reception table wearing a simple black dress from J. Crew, $120, not designer. Black flats from Clark's, $80. The same fake pearl necklace Richard's mother had given me 20 years ago. The kind you could tell was costume jewelry if you looked closely enough. Most people looked closely. My hair, 60% gray and uncolored, pulled back in a simple bun. No makeup except a nude lipstick so pale it barely registered. On my wrist, a Timex watch from 1998, the kind that cost $40 and kept perfect time, but announced to everyone that I either couldn't afford better or didn't know the difference. I knew the difference. I owned a Patek Philippe. It sat in a safety deposit box in Baltimore, along with documents proving I controlled $52 million in real estate assets. Across the room, Sophia greeted guests in a custom Chanel dress, $6,500 I knew, because I'd seen her post about it on Instagram 3 months ago. Black Jimmy Choo heels, $1,200. The Hermes Birkin bag resting on a nearby chair, $15,000. She looked like old money, which was ironic because she was drowning in debt. $340,000 across 7 credit cards, plus $180,000 in margin calls on personal investments gone bad. I knew because I'd hired a private investigator. I knew everything. Marcus stood near the bar in a Brioni suit that cost $5,000, wearing the Patek Philippe his father had given him for making partner. $48,000 of watch, announcing his success to a room full of people who measured worth in visible wealth. His wife Amanda beside him in Prada, looking elegant and expensive and entirely unaware that her husband had lost $420,000 in cryptocurrency and was currently being audited by the IRS. Diane moved through the crowd with practiced grace, touching arms and accepting condolences. She wore Chanel too, a suit this time, $5,600, diamond rings on 3 fingers. The confident posture of someone who belonged in rooms like this, who'd spent 36 years living in my husband's guest house rent-free, who Richard's will had left exactly nothing, and who was now working with an attorney to have me declared incompetent so she could control my assets as my guardian. I knew this too. I knew everything, because silence isn't absence. Silence is reconnaissance. And I'd been gathering intelligence for 18 years. The minister finished speaking. People dabbed their eyes. Diane stood to deliver her eulogy, her voice carrying that perfect blend of grief and strength that comes from years of practice at Navy events. Richard was an extraordinary man. He built this family with strength and wisdom. He provided for all of us so generously. And I know his greatest wish was that we take care of Elena now that he's gone. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room before landing on me with what looked like compassion but felt like assessment. She's never been strong with finances or practical matters. But don't worry, Elena, we'll make sure you're taken care of. You won't have to worry about anything. 300 people nodded. Sympathetic faces turned toward me. The poor second wife, confused by money, overwhelmed by loss, needing guidance from people who understood the complicated world of assets and investments. I looked down at my hands, folded them in my lap, let my shoulders curve inward slightly, the body language of someone diminished. Let my eyes well up just enough to seem emotional, but not enough to require tissue. Let everyone see exactly what they expected. quiet Elena, sweet Elena, helpless Elena, who couldn't possibly manage on her own. Inside, I was counting properties, counting revenue streams, counting the precise number of days until I revealed the truth. 18 years of silence, 7 more days until strike. The reception continued around me. People approached with condolences that felt like evaluations. Elena, you poor thing, how will you manage? Thank you for your kindness, I'll be fine. Elena, if you need anything at all. I appreciate that, really. Elena, Richard left you well provided for, I'm sure. That house is beautiful, but it's so big for one person. Have you thought about downsizing? I'll think about it. It's all so overwhelming right now. The same responses over and over, variations on a theme of helpless gratitude, each one reinforcing their belief that I was exactly what I appeared to be, a woman who'd spent 34 years being taken care of and had no idea how to function without someone making decisions for her. Let them believe it. Belief is a weapon if you know how to aim it. Near the windows, I spotted Colonel Sarah Martinez, retired Marine, 65 years old, my real estate attorney, and one of 3 people who knew the truth. She caught my eye across the room. The question in her expression was clear. Is it time? I gave the slightest shake of my head. Not yet. Let them show themselves first. Sarah understood immediately. She'd spent 30 years in the Marines. She knew about strategy, about letting the enemy commit before you reveal your position. She nodded once and turned back to her conversation with a retired admiral, who had no idea the elegant woman beside him managed a $52 million real estate portfolio. A young lieutenant approached, earnest and well-meaning. Mrs. Whitmore, I served under Admiral Whitmore on the USS Gettysburg. He spoke about you often. He always said you were the steady one, the calm in any storm. The irony hit like a physical blow. Richard had described me as steady the way you describe furniture, useful, reliable, not particularly interesting, but there when you needed it. The lieutenant meant it as a compliment. He had no idea it was exactly the kind of faint praise that had kept me invisible for 3 decades. Thank you, Lieutenant. That's kind of you to say. He moved on, satisfied he'd paid proper respects, never knowing that the steady one he'd just dismissed owned more assets than his admiral had accumulated in 40 years of service. Sophia appeared at my elbow, her perfume expensive and too strong. Mom, how are you holding up? I'm managing, honey. Listen, I know this isn't the time, but Marcus and I need to talk to you. About the house. About your future. We're worried about you being alone in that big place. Her voice carried genuine concern, the kind that sounds like love but comes from fear. She needed her inheritance, needed it desperately. And the house, my house, the one Richard had left me, represented a potential obstacle. If I held on to it, if I didn't sell, that was $1.4 million tied up in real estate when she needed liquid assets to cover her debts. I understand your concern. Can we talk about it later, after things settle down? Of course, of course. I just want you to know we're here for you. Whatever you need. She squeezed my hand. Her rings, real diamonds this time, purchased on credit she couldn't afford, pressing into my skin. Then she glided away to speak with someone important, someone who mattered, leaving me with the other widows and elderly guests who occupied the social periphery of these events. I moved through the reception like a ghost, there but not quite present, observing everything while appearing to notice nothing. This was my superpower, cultivated over 34 years, the ability to be in a room and gather information while everyone assumed I was just quietly grieving, quietly confused, quietly waiting for someone to tell me what to do next. At 4:30, the reception ended. People filed out with promises to check on me, to bring casseroles, to help with whatever I needed. Diane kissed my cheek, her lips barely touching skin. Get some rest, dear. We'll talk soon about arrangements. Marcus and Amanda offered to drive me home. I declined, pointing to my 12-year-old Honda Civic in the parking lot. I'll be fine. I like driving. It helps me think. Marcus frowned, the expression of a concerned son, though what he was really concerned about was whether I was competent enough to manage an estate worth $1.6 million without supervision. Are you sure, Mom? The house is going to feel empty tonight. I've been preparing for empty for a long time. The words came out more honest than I'd intended. Marcus looked uncomfortable, unsure how to respond to actual emotion from someone he'd categorized as pleasantly bland. He settled for a hug, brief and awkward, then left with Amanda, their Mercedes disappearing into Newport traffic. I stood in the parking lot as the sun began its descent, watching the last guest trickle away. The officers' club behind me, grand and historic, mine in ways none of them could imagine. I'd bought it not for profit, but for sentiment, for the memory of what the Navy had meant to me before I'd given it up to become Richard's wife. Lieutenant Junior Grade Elena Thompson, surface warfare officer, 28 years old and ambitious, meeting Commander Richard Whitmore at a reception in Norfolk. He was 34, a widower with 2 small children, handsome in that regulation way that Navy officers often were. Sophia had been 2 years old then, Marcus a newborn, their mother dead from complications after childbirth, Richard overwhelmed and grieving and looking for someone to fill the gap. I'd filled it, stepped into the role of instant mother and Navy wife, resigned my commission after 6 months of marriage because Richard got orders to the Pentagon and someone needed to stay with the children. "It's your choice, of course," he'd said, but the way he held Marcus on his hip, the way Sophia clung to his leg, I knew it wasn't really a choice at all. "I'll resign." "Are you sure?" I wasn't sure. But I'd learned in the Navy that sometimes you sacrifice your position to protect your mission. I just didn't realize then that I'd be sacrificing for 34 years. The drive home took 20 minutes. Arlington Street's familiar and comfortable, the kind of upper-middle-class neighborhood where Navy families lived when they could afford something better than base housing. The house Richard had bought in 1995, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a yard that needed constant maintenance and property taxes of $18,000 a year. Our house. Except it had never felt like ours. It had felt like his achievement, his provision, his generous gift to a woman who couldn't have afforded it on her own. What Richard hadn't known was that I could have bought 3 houses like this with cash and still had enough left over to retire anywhere in the world. Inside, silence greeted me, the kind of silence that's different from being alone. This was the silence of absence, of a presence removed, of 34 years suddenly over with nothing but empty rooms and questions about what came next. I set my purse on the kitchen counter, made tea, sat at the table where Richard and I had eaten thousands of meals, where I'd helped Sophia and Marcus with homework, where I'd pretended my life was small and manageable because pretending had become easier than explaining. My laptop sat in the home office upstairs, the office that had been Richard's study until I'd quietly converted it after his diagnosis. The room he never entered anymore because climbing stairs had become difficult. The room where I conducted business he knew nothing about. I carried my tea upstairs and opened the laptop. 73 properties appeared on my screen in a neat spreadsheet, each one with its address, purchase price, current value, rental income, occupancy rate, a map of the eastern seaboard dotted with pins representing my empire. 45 residential rentals scattered across Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, 12 small apartment buildings, 8 to 20 units each, generating steady income from long-term tenants. 8 commercial properties, office buildings, retail spaces, a small shopping plaza in Baltimore that I'd bought during the 2008 crisis for pennies on the dollar. 6 mixed-use developments that combined residential and commercial space. 2 boutique hotels, one in Annapolis and one in Virginia Beach, both renovated to historical accuracy and running at 92% occupancy year-round. Total portfolio value, $52.3 million. Total debt, $20.5 million in mortgages and commercial loans. Net worth, $31.8 million. Monthly revenue after all expenses, $427,000. Richard had left me $1.4 million in the house and $200,000 in cash, thinking he was being generous, thinking I'd be set for life with $1.6 million to live on carefully, probably needing help from Sophia and Marcus to make good decisions. He'd never asked about my days, never wondered what I did with my time when he was at the Pentagon or later at Naval Station Norfolk. Never questioned why I drove a 12-year-old Honda, or shopped at Target, or wore clothes from clearance racks. He'd assumed it was because I didn't know better, didn't care about appearances, was content with modest means because I didn't understand that wealth was supposed to be visible. The truth was I'd been hiding in plain sight. Every dollar I didn't spend on myself was a dollar I could invest. Every time someone saw me in clearance rack clothes and assumed I was simple or unworldly, they stopped paying attention. And when people stop paying attention, you can build an empire right under their noses. I closed the laptop and walked to the bedroom window. Arlington at dusk, lights coming on in neighboring houses, families settling in for evening routines. My reflection in the glass looked exactly like what everyone thought I was. A 62-year-old widow, gray hair, simple clothes, no remarkable features. Invisible. But invisibility is a choice, and tomorrow I'd begin the process of choosing to be seen. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah Martinez. Confirmed for September 7th. Venue secured. Admiral Jackson agreed to MC. Guest list at 2:47. Press credentials approved for 2 local reporters covering naval history tribute. They have no idea what they're actually going to cover. I typed back perfect. And the legal filings? Sarah. Ready to file September 6th at 4 p.m. Guardianship petition will be blocked before they can formally submit. Your preemptive competency evaluation scheduled for September 5th, with 3 witnesses, including 2 admirals and a federal judge. By the time they try to declare you incompetent, you'll have documentation from the most credible sources in Virginia that you're not just competent but exceptional. The plan was coming together with military precision. September 7th would have been Richard's 69th birthday. Instead of a birthday celebration, it would be a reckoning. But I had 7 more days. 7 days to let them reveal themselves completely, to let them commit to their strategy so thoroughly that there would be no walking it back. I needed them confident, certain, convinced that I was exactly what I appeared to be, which meant continuing the performance. The next morning, I woke at 6. Old habits from Navy days, when reveille meant you were up and ready regardless of how you felt. I dressed in comfortable clothes, yoga pants from Target, an old Navy t-shirt Richard had gotten at some conference, slip-on shoes that had seen better days. No makeup, hair in a simple ponytail, the uniform of a woman who'd stopped trying. I drove to the grocery store at 7 when it was relatively empty, bought the basics. At the checkout, I fumbled with my wallet, dropping coins, apologizing to the cashier in a flustered way. "I'm so sorry, I can't seem to... My hands are shaking this morning. It's been a hard week." The cashier, a young woman with kind eyes, reached over and helped me count out change. "Take your time, ma'am. I'm so sorry for your loss. Everyone's been talking about Admiral Whitmore's memorial. He was a great man." "Thank you, dear, he was." The woman behind me in line sighed audibly, impatient with how long this was taking. I apologized again, gathered my bags with trembling hands, and left feeling certain that both women would remember the confused widow who couldn't manage simple tasks. Word would spread. In a community like this, where Navy families knew each other and news traveled through networks of spouses and friends, it would take less than 48 hours for people to start saying poor Elena is really struggling. She couldn't even pay for groceries without getting confused. At home, I unloaded groceries and made breakfast. While the eggs cooked, I opened my laptop and checked on my properties. 3 maintenance requests from tenants, all routine. 1 vacancy in Baltimore that needed to be filled. An inquiry from a potential buyer for one of my commercial properties. An offer of $2.1 million for a building I'd bought for $800,000 in 2010. I forwarded everything to Linda Chen, my property manager. Linda was 55, a former CPA who'd been trapped in a controlling marriage until I'd offered her a way out. She managed all 73 properties now, made $180,000 a year, and her husband still thought she volunteered at the library 3 days a week. Linda responded within 15 minutes. "Maintenance approved. Baltimore vacancy will be filled by month end. Commercial property offer is lowball. I can get 2.4 M's minimum. Want me to counter?" I typed, "Counter at 2.5 M. Let's see how serious they are." Done. How are you holding up? Playing the part. Performance of my life. Linda sent back a string of emojis. A crown, a chess piece, a bullseye. She understood. She'd been invisible too for years, until invisibility had become unbearable. Now she was thriving, and every success she had reminded me why I'd spent 18 years building this. Not for myself, though that was part of it, but for women like Linda, for every wife who'd been told she didn't understand finances, for every mother who'd been dismissed as just a homemaker, for everyone who'd been underestimated so thoroughly that they'd started to believe it themselves. The empire wasn't just about money, it was about proof. Proof that we were never the problem. They were. At 9:30, my phone rang. Sophia. Mom, hi, how are you doing? I'm okay, sweetheart. Just taking things day by day. Listen, Marcus and I were thinking we should come by this afternoon. We need to talk about some practical matters. The house, your finances, making sure you're set up for the future. Practical matters was code for we need to convince you to sell, and probably move somewhere we can keep an eye on you. Today's not great, honey. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Could we do it later in the week? Mom, the longer we wait, the harder it gets. There are decisions that need to be made, time-sensitive things. Time-sensitive, like getting their inheritance secured before I complicated matters by proving competent. Time-sensitive, like having me declared incompetent while I was still grieving and vulnerable, before I had time to hire my own attorney or push back. What if I said Thursday? Would that work? A pause. Calculation happening on the other end. Thursday would be August 22nd. The will reading had been on Monday, July 22nd. 1 month exactly. Enough time to seem respectful of my grief, but not so long that I might start making my own plans. Thursday works. How about 2 o'clock? We'll bring lunch. That sounds nice. We hung up. I marked Thursday on my calendar with a note. Family intervention attempt. Let them make their case. Because I needed them to show their hand completely. I needed to hear their arguments, their reasoning, their plans for my future. I needed them to commit so thoroughly to treating me like an incompetent child that when I revealed the truth, the contrast would be undeniable. The rest of the week passed in careful performance. On Tuesday, I called Marcus crying because I couldn't figure out how to work the new TV remote. He came over, found me staring helplessly at a screen showing input options. Mom, it's just the input button, see? You press this to switch between cable and streaming. It's all so complicated now. Your father always handled the technology. Marcus spent 20 minutes teaching me basic TV functions. His patience wearing thin, but his concern genuine. He thought he was helping a confused elderly woman. He had no idea he was feeding evidence into a narrative I'd been constructing for weeks. On Wednesday, I arranged my masterpiece. I'd left a burner on after making tea, just long enough for smoke to trigger the alarm. Not enough for actual danger, but enough for drama. I'd called 911 myself, playing panicked and disoriented. I don't know what happened. I was making tea and then the alarm went off and there's smoke and I can't remember if I turned on the stove or... The fire department arrived within 7 minutes. 2 trucks, 6 firefighters, for what turned out to be a pot of water that had boiled dry. The fire chief knew me slightly. I owned the building where the fire station rented storage space for their equipment, though they had no idea I was their landlord. And he was kind but firm. Mrs. Whitmore, you're very lucky. If this had gone on much longer, you could have had a serious fire. Is there someone who can stay with you, family? My stepchildren are nearby. I'm sure they'll want to know about this. The chief's report would note that an elderly widow living alone had left a burner on, had become confused, had required emergency response for something that could have been easily prevented with basic attention. Within an hour, Marcus arrived. His concern had shifted into something harder to read. Worry mixed with determination. Mom, this is serious. You could have burned the house down. What if you hadn't noticed? What if you'd gone upstairs and left it running? I sat on the porch, wrapped in the cardigan I'd thrown on over my clothes, looking smaller and older than my 62 years. I don't know what happened. I don't remember turning it on. I thought I was just filling the kettle. You thought you were filling the kettle, but you turned on the burner? I must have. I don't know. Everything's been so foggy since your father died. The confusion in my voice was pitch perfect. I'd practiced it, found the exact tone between frightened and bewildered that would convince without overplaying. Marcus sat beside me, his jaw tight with the expression of someone making a difficult decision. Mom, we need to have this serious conversation, you, me, and Sophia, tomorrow at 2, because this can't keep happening. I nodded, tears in my eyes that were genuine, because I was thinking about Richard. About 34 years of being treated like I couldn't handle the complexities of adult life, about how close I was to making them understand exactly how wrong they'd been. Thursday afternoon arrived with the precision of a military operation. I dressed carefully, baggy sweatpants, an oversized sweater despite the August heat, fuzzy socks that made me look like I'd given up on the concept of appearance entirely, hair uncombed, no makeup, the picture of a woman falling apart. Sophia and Marcus arrived together at exactly 2 o'clock. Sophia carried bags from an expensive deli, $60 worth of sandwiches and sides, probably charged to a credit card already maxed out. Marcus had a legal folder under one arm, the kind lawyers use for important documents. They settled around the kitchen table, arranging food with too much care, the way people do when they're preparing for an uncomfortable conversation. Sophia started, her voice gentle but firm. "Mom, we're worried about you. The fire, forgetting things, seeming confused. Marcus and I have been talking, and we think you need help." I looked down at my sandwich, untouched. "What kind of help?" Marcus opened his folder, pulling out papers with official letterhead. "There's a legal process called guardianship. It means someone, in this case probably me since I'm an attorney, would be appointed to help you with major decisions, managing finances, healthcare choices, daily living decisions. It's not about taking away your independence. It's about making sure you're safe." "But I don't want that. I'm fine. I'm just adjusting." Sophia reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "Mom, you left a burner on. You couldn't work the TV remote. You forgot your wallet at the grocery store. These aren't normal adjustments. They're signs that you need support." "You think I'm incompetent." The word hung in the air, sharp and ugly. "No, Mom, you think I can't take care of myself. We think you need help. There's a difference." But there wasn't a difference, not in any way that mattered. Guardianship meant they'd control my assets, make decisions about where I lived, how I spent my money, whether I was capable of basic adult functions. It meant the invisible wife would become the legally incompetent ward, and the $1.6 million Richard had left me would be managed by people who thought I'd never understood money in the first place. It meant they'd sell this house, the one thing Richard had actually left in my name, and put me somewhere convenient, somewhere they could monitor me, somewhere I'd be out of the way while they lived their lives on inheritances they desperately needed. My hands started shaking, real shaking this time from anger I couldn't show yet. "Please leave, just go." "Mom," I said, "leave." The force in my voice surprised them. For a moment the mask slipped and they saw something underneath. Not confusion, not helplessness, but fury. Then I let my face crumple, let tears come, let my shoulders shake with sobs that looked like grief, but felt like rage. They left. Sophia tried to hug me, but I pulled away. Marcus set the legal folder on the table, his face troubled. "We'll talk soon, when you're ready." "But Mom, this conversation isn't over." The door closed behind them. I waited 5 minutes, listening to their car pull away. Then I stood, walked to the window, and watched until their Mercedes disappeared around the corner. The tears stopped immediately. I picked up the legal folder Marcus had left, scanned through it quickly. Petition for guardianship, citing diminished capacity, multiple incidents of confusion, risk of harm to self, need for protective oversight. Already drafted, just waiting for names to be filled in and filed with the court. I pulled out my phone, photographed every page, and texted them to Sarah Martinez. "They're moving faster than expected. Filing drafted, ready to submit any day now." Sarah's response was immediate. "Good, means they're committed. No backing out now. How's your performance holding up?" I texted back, "I should win an Oscar." The next 3 days I spent in careful preparation. On Friday, I drove 2 hours to Richmond to meet with my team at a hotel conference room far from anyone who might recognize me. Sarah Martinez sat at the head of the table, 70 pages of legal documents spread before her. Frank Wu, my accountant and forensic analyst, had his laptop open showing financial spreadsheets. Linda Chen brought property portfolios. Tom Rodriguez, the private investigator, had files on everyone involved. Sarah started without preamble. "We've completed full background on Sophia, Marcus, and Diane. It's worse than you thought." She pulled up a presentation on the screen. Sophia, credit card debt of $340,000 across 7 cards, all maxed out. Margin calls on personal investment accounts totaling $180,000. Her husband James is planning to leave her. Filed preliminary divorce papers last month but hasn't served them yet. Waiting to see how the inheritance shakes out. The screen showed bank statements, credit reports, email exchanges between Sophia and her increasingly angry creditors. My stepdaughter, who presented herself as a successful investment banker, was drowning in debt she'd accumulated trying to look successful. Marcus lost $420,000 in cryptocurrency between 2022 and 2023, currently under IRS audit for unreported income. His partnership at Morrison & Blake is contingent on resolving his financial issues. If he can't prove solvency, they'll force him out. His wife Amanda doesn't know about any of this. More documents appeared. trading records showing catastrophic losses, IRS correspondence with aggressive language about penalties and potential criminal prosecution, email from the managing partner at Marcus's firm. We need to see evidence of financial stability by end of Q3, or we'll have to reconsider your partnership status. And Diane, no income, no assets, has been living rent-free in Richard's guest house for 36 years. Richard's will left her nothing, not a dollar, not a piece of furniture, nothing. She's been meeting with Marcus Brenner, an attorney who specializes in elder guardianship. They're building a case to have you declared incompetent so Diane can be appointed guardian and control your assets. Tom pushed photographs across the table. Diane entering a law office, Diane sitting at a cafe with Marcus Brenner, documents visible on the table between them. Diane at what appeared to be a medical office. She's been seeing a psychiatrist claiming she's concerned about your mental health. She's trying to build a medical file suggesting you have dementia or diminished capacity. She's told the psychiatrist she's your primary caregiver and has observed significant decline, none of which is true. None of which is true, Tom confirmed. But it builds a narrative. Confused widow, concerned family, medical professional expressing worry. By the time it gets to a judge, you look like someone who needs protection. Frank opened a new spreadsheet. Here's what they stand to gain if they succeed. Your estate from Richard, $1.4 million in the house plus $200,000 cash, total $1.6 million. If they get guardianship, they sell the house, put you in a state-funded facility, and split the money. Sophia pays off her debts. Marcus covers his IRS issues and saves his partnership. Diane gets a cut for being the guardian. What they don't know is that you're worth $31.8 million independent of anything Richard left you. What they don't know, I said slowly, is that the incompetent woman they're trying to control has been running circles around them for 18 years. The room fell quiet. These were people who knew me, who'd watched me build the empire property by property, who understood what I'd accomplished while pretending to be simple and confused. They knew the performance was brilliant. They also knew it was about to end. Sarah leaned forward. Elena, we can stop this right now. File protective orders, reveal your assets, prove competency, and shut down their guardianship plan before they ever submit it. I shook my head. No, I need them to commit fully. I need them so convinced I'm incompetent that they file the petition, that they go on record with their beliefs about my capabilities. Because when I reveal the truth, I don't want room for interpretation. I don't want them to be able to say they were just concerned family members trying to help. I want it absolutely clear that they saw me as incompetent, tried to take control of my assets, and were completely wrong about every assumption they made. When do you want to do it? Frank asked. September 7th, Richard's birthday. There's going to be a memorial tribute at the Officers Club. Which you own, Linda interjected with a smile. Which I own. We'll frame it as a Navy history presentation. Sophia and Marcus will attend expecting a nice tribute to their father. Instead, they're going to learn who I actually am. Sarah made notes. I'll need to file preemptive documentation, competency evaluations from credible sources. Admiral Jackson has agreed to provide testimony. Federal Judge Williams will do the same. We'll establish that not only are you competent, but you're exceptional. By the time we're done, any attempt to claim diminished capacity will look ridiculous. How many people will be there? 250 confirmed guests. Naval officers, local business leaders, some press covering the history tribute angle. It'll be very public, very documented. No room for them to claim it was a private family matter. Perfect. The team spent the next 3 hours going over details. Every aspect choreographed with precision. Timing of revelations. Order of presentations. Legal documents that would be simultaneously filed with the court. Press releases that would go out to local media. Everything coordinated to create maximum impact with undeniable evidence. By the time I left Richmond, it was dark. I drove home through Virginia countryside, thinking about the girl I'd been at 28, Lieutenant Junior Grade Elena Thompson, ambitious and capable, giving it all up to become Richard's wife, believing that sacrifice meant love, that supporting his career was the same as valuing my own potential. I'd been wrong, but the wrongness had taught me something Richard never understood. That the most powerful position is the one no one knows you hold. That visible success is nothing compared to invisible empire. That letting people underestimate you means they never see the strike coming until it's already landed. At home, I sat in the kitchen where Marcus had left his guardianship petition folder. I read through it again, every word, every citation, every assumption about my incompetence. The anger I'd felt earlier had crystallized into something colder and more useful. 7 days. They had 7 more days to believe they'd won, 7 more days to plan how they'd spend my inheritance, 7 more days to convince themselves that I needed their help, their guidance, their control. And then I'd show them what quiet Elena had built while they weren't paying attention. I opened my laptop one last time before bed. 73 properties glowing on the screen, 31.8 million in net worth, $427,000 in monthly revenue. All of it built from nothing, from household allowances and thrift store savings and determination that looked like simplicity. An email notification appeared. Linda Chen, Baltimore vacancy filled, commercial property buyer countered at 2.4 M. I think we hold for 2.5 M, but your call. I typed back, hold. We don't negotiate from weakness. Because I'd spent 34 years negotiating from weakness, from the position of the second wife who didn't understand money, who needed guidance, who should be grateful for whatever she was given. No more. September 7th was going to be the day I negotiated from strength, from truth, from the position of someone who'd built an empire while pretending to be helpless. They thought silence meant nothing. They were about to learn that silence was reconnaissance, that the quiet one had been watching, gathering intelligence, preparing for exactly this moment. 18 years of silence, 7 days until strike. And when the strike came, it would be precise, devastating, and absolutely undeniable. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I'd continue the performance. Confused Elena, helpless Elena, poor Elena who couldn't work a TV remote or remember to turn off the stove. But underneath the performance, Commander Elena Whitmore was counting down, preparing, waiting for the perfect moment to remind everyone who'd forgotten that she'd once been a naval officer trained in strategy and timing, and the art of the perfectly executed operation. They'd dismissed that part of me so completely they'd forgotten it existed. Their mistake. In the darkness of my bedroom, I smiled. Not the trembling smile of a confused widow. The sharp smile of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and exactly how it's going to end. 7 days. Saturday morning broke humid and gray over Arlington. I woke before dawn, habit overriding grief, and dressed in clothes that would pass inspection at the formal memorial service later. Black dress from Talbot's this time, $140, purchased specifically because it looked appropriate without looking affluent. Sensible heels that added no height, hair styled at home into something neat but unremarkable. The memorial at Newport Naval Station was scheduled for 1,400 hours. I had 8 hours to prepare. In the bathroom mirror, I practiced expressions. Grief with dignity, confusion with grace. The slight unfocused quality in my eyes that suggested someone not quite present, someone struggling with basic comprehension. Each micro-expression calibrated. This was tradecraft, the kind I'd learned watching Richard navigate Pentagon politics for decades. Know what face to show, when to show it, and never let anyone see the calculations underneath. At 0900, Sophia called. Mom, Marcus and I are driving up together. We'll pick you up at noon. No arguments. You shouldn't drive to Newport alone. Her tone left no room for discussion. She needed to control the transportation, needed me dependent on them for the most basic logistics. Needed to demonstrate to everyone watching that poor Elena couldn't even manage the drive to her own husband's memorial. That's thoughtful, honey. I'll be ready. I hung up and texted Sarah Martinez. They're picking me up. Changes nothing but confirms desperation. How many RSVPs? Sarah, 2:47. Confirmed for September 7th. Press credentials finalized. Greenwich Time and Virginia Pilot both sending reporters. Naval Station CO approved full access. Everything's locked. The memorial today was just theater, a warm-up act for the main event 13 days away. But theater served a purpose. It let me observe them performing, let me catalog their assumptions, their certainties about who I was and what I represented. At noon exactly, Marcus's Mercedes pulled into my driveway. Sophia emerged from the passenger side wearing Dior, a dress that cost $4,000 she didn't have, purchased on credit extended by banks that didn't know her accounts were bleeding. She moved with the confidence of someone who believed inherited money was already hers, just temporarily inaccessible. Mom, you look nice. The compliment felt like assessment. Sophia's eyes cataloged my outfit, my shoes, my minimal jewelry, filing it all under evidence of someone who couldn't or wouldn't present herself properly. Thank you, sweetheart. Marcus held the back door. I slid into leather seats that cost more than 3 months of the household allowance Richard had given me for 34 years. The irony wasn't lost. I owned properties generating more monthly revenue than Marcus's annual salary. But I sat in the back of his car like a child being driven by responsible adults. The drive to Newport took 90 minutes. Marcus and Sophia talked around me, their conversation carefully neutral, avoiding anything too complex or financial. They discussed the memorial program, who would speak, which admirals were attending, whether the weather would hold. Every few minutes, Sophia turned to check on me. You okay, Bodhi? You okay back there, Mom? No, Mom. I'm fine, dear. Just thinking about your father. Which was true in a way they couldn't understand. I was thinking about Richard, about the man who'd loved me in his fashion, but had never trusted me with adult responsibilities, about the will that left me 1.6 million, while assuming I'd need guidance to manage it, about the final conversation I'd overheard, where he'd told his attorney that I lacked the capacity for financial complexity. Richard had been wrong about many things, but he'd been right about one. I'd never been strong with finances the way he understood strength. I'd never invested in stocks he could track, or bought properties he could see, or accumulated wealth in ways that would appear on joint tax returns. My strength had been invisible, which meant he'd never recognized it as strength at all. We arrived at Newport Naval Station at 13:30. Security waved us through. Marcus's credentials as Richard's son carried weight here. The officers' club rose before us, white columns in red brick, the American flag at full staff, because this was a celebration of service, not a funeral requiring half-mast. My building, my property. 8.7 million in historic real estate that Richard had mourned losing when the Navy sold it, never knowing his invisible wife had purchased it through shell companies specifically to preserve it. The irony was becoming a physical sensation, something sharp in my chest that I couldn't name. Pride, anger, vindication, all three twisted together until I couldn't separate them. Inside, the transformation was complete. The main hall where the portrait hung had been arranged for a formal military memorial. 300 chairs in perfect rows, Navy flags flanking a stage, photographs of Richard's career displayed on easels, his commissioning photo at 22, his first command at 38, his promotion to admiral at 52. A life documented in milestones that looked impressive until you remembered that behind each promotion, someone had been home managing children and household in invisibility. Diane appeared immediately, elegant in black Armani that probably cost $6,000. She'd been spending Richard's money right up until he died, not realizing the will left her nothing. Now she moved through the crowd with the authority of someone who believed she still belonged to the family, who thought widowhood had granted her status, rather than revealed her position as someone who'd lived 36 years on borrowed security. Elena, dear, you look tired. Are you holding up? I'm managing. It's overwhelming seeing so many people. Diane touched my arm, her grip just firm enough to feel controlling. Stay close to me. I'll help you navigate. I know this is all very confusing. She guided me toward the front row, where reserved signs marked seats for immediate family. Sophia and Marcus flanked me. Diane took the aisle seat, positioning herself as gatekeeper between me and anyone who might approach. The service began at 1400 exactly. Military precision, no delays, no casual disregard for schedule. Admiral Jackson took the podium. 68 years old, 3 stars, a man who'd served with Richard for 20 years. His eulogy was everything you'd expect: service, sacrifice, leadership, dedication to country and family. Admiral Whitmore understood that command means responsibility, not just to your ship or your sailors, but to everyone counting on you. He provided for his family with the same strategic thinking he brought to naval operations. He ensured their future was secure. People nodded. I sat with hands folded, face composed in appropriate sadness, while inside I calculated how long until I could reveal that the future Richard had secured was a fraction of what his invisible wife had built, without him noticing. More speakers. Richard's former executive officer, a captain who'd served under him, each one praising Richard's foresight, his planning, his ability to think strategically about long-term outcomes. Each one unknowingly describing skills his wife had developed to a degree he'd never imagined. Then Diane stood to deliver her prepared remarks. She moved to the podium with practiced grace, every gesture suggesting someone who belonged on that stage, who had earned the right to speak about Richard's legacy. Richard Whitmore was more than a brilliant naval officer. He was a family man who thought about the people he loved with the same care he brought to military strategy. His children were his pride. His wife Elena was his concern, not because he doubted her, but because he wanted to ensure she'd always be protected. The words landed like small detonations. Protected, not trusted, not empowered, not respected as an equal partner. Protected, like a child or an asset requiring safeguarding. Richard knew that life after him would be complicated for Elena. Financial decisions, property management, the complexities of inheritance and taxes and planning. So he made absolutely certain that she would have guidance, that his children would step in, that she would never be alone in facing decisions she wasn't equipped to make. My fingernails dug into my palms, the only sign of response I allowed myself. Around me, people were nodding sympathetically, looking at me with pity and understanding. Poor Elena, so dependent, so in need of protection from the harsh realities of adult financial life. Sophia reached over and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, playing the grateful widow, while my mind replayed Diane's words. Wasn't equipped to make, as if equipment was something you were issued rather than something you built through 18 years of disciplined investment and strategic planning. The service concluded with military honors. A detail of sailors presented the flag folded in precise triangles. Taps played, each note hanging in the air longer than seemed possible. Then it was over, and people were moving toward the reception area where my staff, people I employed who thought they worked for an anonymous investment group, served food and drinks I'd approved the budget for. The next 2 hours were performance art. I moved through the crowd, letting people guide me, accepting condolences, allowing myself to be positioned and repositioned like furniture. Every interaction reinforced the narrative Diane had established. Elena needs help. Elena is overwhelmed. Elena is not equipped for what comes next. A retired captain approached, kind-faced and genuinely concerned. Mrs. Whitmore, if you need anything, help with paperwork, understanding your finances, anything at all, please reach out. The Navy community takes care of its own. That's very kind. I'm fortunate to have Sophia and Marcus to help me. Because that was the script. I was fortunate. I needed help. I was lucky someone was willing to guide me through the complexity I couldn't navigate alone. Near the windows, I spotted Colonel Sarah Martinez in conversation with Admiral Jackson. Sarah caught my eye for just a moment, long enough to communicate. Performing beautifully. They're buying every second. At 1700, Diane announced it was time for a family-only gathering. She'd reserved a private room off the main hall, a room in my building, which she'd reserved without knowing she was asking permission from the owner through my management company. 10 people assembled. Sophia and her husband James, Marcus and his wife Amanda, Diane, and 3 of Richard's Navy colleagues who were considered close enough to be included, and me, seated at the end of the table, like an attendee to a meeting about my own future. Diane began without preamble. I want to thank everyone for coming today. Richard would have been proud of this tribute. Now we need to discuss practical matters. The will reading is scheduled for Monday morning at Morrison & Associates. Elena, honey, I know this is difficult, but there will be legal terminology, complex financial discussions. I've arranged for Marcus to explain everything to you afterward in simpler terms. Simpler terms, because the complex version would be beyond my comprehension. That's thoughtful, Diane. I appreciate everyone's patience with me. Marcus opened a leather portfolio, pulling out documents. Mom, the estate is straightforward. The house goes to you, plus a cash sum. Sophia and I receive the investment accounts and life insurance through a trust. But we need to talk about the house. Property taxes alone are $18,000 annually. Insurance, maintenance, utilities. You're looking at $40,000 to $50,000 a year in expenses to maintain it. He let the numbers hang there, impressive sounding to someone who supposedly didn't understand finance. What he didn't know was that I owned properties with combined annual expenses exceeding $2 million, managed through budgets I reviewed quarterly with Linda Chen. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot, Mom. Too much for someone on a fixed income, which is why Sophia and I think you should consider selling. We've already talked to a realtor. You've already talked to a realtor? Before the will reading? The sharpness in my voice surprised them. For a moment, the mask slipped and they saw something underneath. Marcus's expression shifted, uncertain whether he'd overstepped or whether this was more evidence of instability. We wanted to be prepared, to help you make informed decisions quickly. I softened deliberately, let confusion replace the flash of anger. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap. Everything is just so much right now. Sophia leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Mom, we understand this is overwhelming. That's exactly why we're trying to help. The realtor estimated the house at $1.4 million. After fees and taxes, you'd net about $1.2 million. Combined with Dad's cash bequest, you'd have $1.4 million liquid. That's enough to buy a nice condo and live comfortably on the income. Amanda, Marcus's wife, spoke up for the first time. As an attorney herself, she brought a different kind of authority. There's also the matter of capacity. Elena, no one is questioning your intelligence or your character, but grief affects cognitive function. Studies show that major life changes impair decision-making ability, especially in older adults. Having family support during this time isn't just helpful, it's medically advisable. She'd planted it carefully. Grief, cognitive function, older adults, each term suggesting decline without directly accusing me of incompetence. James, Sophia's husband, added his perspective as someone in finance. The housing market right now favors sellers. If you wait too long, that could change. And maintaining a property this size alone. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but Richard handled everything. The lawn service, the repairs, the contractors. Do you even know who to call if something breaks? He thought he was being practical. He had no idea I had a property management company on speed dial that handled maintenance requests for 73 properties, including complex commercial spaces. I suppose I'd figure it out. Or call Marcus for help. Exactly, Diane interjected smoothly. You'd need to call for help. Constantly. Wouldn't it be easier to live somewhere manageable? Somewhere with services included? Somewhere they could keep me monitored? Somewhere my incompetence would be visible and controllable? I stood abruptly, my chair scraping back. Can we please discuss this after the will reading? I just held a memorial for my husband. I need time to process everything before making major decisions. The outburst was calculated, but looked spontaneous. Elena pushed past her limits, emotional rather than rational, proving their point about impaired judgment better than any argument they could make. Of course, Mom. Sophia rose, putting an arm around me. We're not trying to pressure you. We just want you to know we're here. They left me alone in the private room after offering more reassurances. Through the door, I heard their voices. Lower now, but still audible. She's really struggling. Did you see how confused she looked when we talked about property taxes? And that outburst completely inappropriate for the setting. I think we need to move faster than we planned. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recording app I'd started when the meeting began, and stopped the recording. 14 minutes of them discussing my incompetence, my need for guidance, my inability to manage adult responsibilities, all documented. Texted Sarah. Have recording a family meeting, their accelerating timeline, will reading Monday at 1000. Sarah, perfect. We're ready. Judge Williams confirmed for competency evaluation September 5th. 3 character witnesses lined up, including Admiral Jackson. By the time they file guardianship petition, you'll have ironclad documentation of capacity from the most credible sources in Virginia. The drive home was quieter. I pretended to doze in the back seat while Sophia and Marcus talked in low tones about next steps, about realtors and retirement communities, and how to handle Mom's emotional volatility. At my house, Marcus walked me to the door. Mom, we love you. Everything we're doing is because we want what's best for you. I know, honey, I'm just tired. Get some rest. We'll pick you up Monday morning for the will reading, 9:30, okay? That's fine. Inside, I locked the door and let the exhaustion hit. Not emotional exhaustion, performative exhaustion. The kind that comes from holding a character for 6 hours straight, never breaking, never letting the real self show through even for a moment. I made tea and opened my laptop. 73 properties glowed on the screen. Monthly revenue, $427,000. Net worth, $31.8 million. All of it invisible to the family currently strategizing about how to manage my modest inheritance. Email from Linda Chen. August numbers finalized. Occupancy rate 96.3%. Revenue up 4% from July. 2 maintenance issues resolved. Baltimore property rented to excellent tenants. 3-year lease signed. Commercial buyer came back at 245 M. Still holding for 2.5 M. I typed, hold. We negotiate from strength, not desperation. Unlike my stepchildren, who were negotiating from desperation disguised as concern. Sophia needed her inheritance to cover 6-figure debts. Marcus needed his to save his career. Diane needed guardianship to ensure she'd have access to resources after Richard's will left her nothing. They were desperate. I was patient. Desperation makes mistakes. Patience wins wars. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The will reading would formalize what I already knew. Richard had left me $1.6 million and left the bulk of his estate to Sophia and Marcus. What they didn't know was that their inheritance was being managed by a company I controlled. I dressed carefully. Outdated suit from Macy's clearance rack, sensible shoes, minimal jewelry, hair simply styled. The appearance of someone doing her best with limited resources and no real sense of style. Sophia and Marcus arrived at 09:30. The drive to Morrison & Associates took 30 minutes through Norfolk morning traffic. The law firm occupied the 20th floor of a waterfront building with views of the harbor where Richard had spent 40 years serving. His attorney, Robert Morrison, had been Richard's friend since their academy days. He drafted the will according to Richard's explicit instructions, believing he was protecting a wife who couldn't protect herself. The conference room was paneled in mahogany, furnished with leather chairs, decorated with maritime paintings that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Morrison sat at the head of the table, files arranged with military precision. Present for the reading, Sophia and James, Marcus and Amanda, Diane and me. 6 people waiting to hear how Richard had divided his life's accumulated wealth. Morrison cleared his throat, put on reading glasses, and opened the will. Thank you all for being here. Admiral Whitmore was very thorough in his estate planning. Everything is clearly documented. He read through the preliminaries. $5,000 to each grandchild for education. $10,000 to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. Personal effects distributed to specific recipients. His dress sword to Marcus, his medals to the Naval Academy Museum, his books to the local library. Then the substance. To my beloved wife Elena Whitmore. I leave our family home at 2847 Admirals Way, Norfolk, Virginia, currently valued at $1.4 million, fully paid off with no mortgage or liens. I also leave her $200,000 from my personal savings account at Navy Federal Credit Union. It is my hope and expectation that this will provide her with financial security for the remainder of her life. Morrison looked up at me, his expression sympathetic. Around the table, others nodded. Generous, appropriate, more than adequate for someone with simple needs. Additionally, the property includes a right of first refusal clause. Should Elena decide to sell the property, my children, Sophia and Marcus, shall have the option to purchase it at 10% below fair market value, as determined by independent appraisal. Marcus sat forward. That detail mattered. 10% below market on a $1.4 million property meant they could buy it for $1.26 million and immediately flip it for full value. $250,000 profit built into the structure. Morrison continued. To my daughter, Sophia Whitmore Chen, and my son, Marcus Whitmore, I leave the remainder of my estate to be divided equally between them. This includes my investment portfolio, currently managed by Prestige Wealth Management, valued at approximately $2.1 million, life insurance policies totaling $1.8 million, and my pension survivor benefits, present value approximately $900,000. The total estate for division is $4.8 million, resulting in $2.4 million for each child. Sophia's shoulders relaxed. Marcus exchanged a glance with Amanda. Both calculations transparent. This was enough. Enough to clear Sophia's debts with room left over. Enough to handle Marcus's IRS problems and save his partnership. These funds will be held in an irrevocable trust managed by Prestige Wealth Management until distribution. The trust terms allow for full distribution. When both beneficiaries reach age 40, or earlier in cases of documented financial hardship, medical emergency, or other circumstances approved by the trustee. Morrison set down the primary will document and picked up an attachment. There's one additional letter Admiral Whitmore asked me to read aloud. He wrote this 1 week before his passing. The room went silent. Even I felt a twist of something. Not quite grief, not quite curiosity. What had Richard wanted to say that wasn't covered in the legal language? Morrison began reading, his voice taking on the cadence of Richard's formal speech patterns. To my family, I've tried to plan for every contingency. Elena, you've been a devoted wife, and I hope the house and financial support I've left will ensure your comfort. But I worry. You've never worked outside the home. You've never managed investments or understood tax implications or dealt with property management. My greatest fear is that you'll make poor decisions out of confusion or because someone will take advantage of your trusting nature. My hands clenched beneath the table. Sophia and Marcus, please watch over your mother, guide her, help her understand that selling the house is probably the right choice, that living somewhere smaller and more manageable will serve her better. Don't let her be stubborn. She sometimes resists practical advice because she doesn't like admitting she needs help. The words landed like small cruelties, each one precise. Trusting nature. Doesn't understand. Resists practical advice. Richard cataloging my inadequacies in a document that would be read to attorneys and family, cementing in legal record his assessment of my capabilities. Diane, thank you for your years of support to this family. I know you'll continue to help Elena navigate what comes next. Morrison finished and set the letter aside. That concludes the formal will reading. Do any beneficiaries have questions about the terms or provisions? Marcus spoke first. The right of first refusal, is there a time limit? If Mom decides to sell, how long do Sophia and I have to make an offer? 30 days from written notice of intent to sell, Morrison confirmed. Standard provision in these situations. And the trust distribution for Sophia and me, the hardship provision. What qualifies? Significant medical expenses, business losses beyond personal control, documented financial emergencies that threaten creditworthiness or employment. The trustee has discretion, but there's case law establishing standards. Amanda, the attorney, had questions about tax implications. James asked about the life insurance payout timeline. Diane wanted clarification on estate expenses and who would handle them. I sat silently, hands folded, as they discussed my life and Richard's assets like I wasn't present. Like I was furniture that required decisions but couldn't participate in making them. Finally, Morrison turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, do you have any questions about the will or your inheritance? The room waited. This was my opportunity to ask for clarification, to request explanation of terms, to prove I didn't understand what had just been read. Instead, I said clearly, I understand the will. The house and $200,000 come to me. The remaining $4.8 million is split between Sophia and Marcus through a trust managed by Prestige Wealth Management. They can't access funds until age 40 unless they qualify for hardship distribution. If I sell the house, they have first option to buy at 10% below market. Is that correct? Morrison blinked, surprised by the precision. Yes, that's exactly correct. Then I have no questions. Sophia and Marcus exchanged glances. Amanda looked puzzled. Diane's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I just demonstrated clear comprehension of complex legal terms, which didn't fit their narrative of confused, incompetent Elena. Time to course correct. I stood, swaying slightly, putting a hand to my forehead. I'm sorry, I need air. It's all very overwhelming. Marcus, could you take me outside for a minute? The moment of clarity forgotten, replaced by the visual of a woman about to faint. Marcus jumped up, took my arm, guided me toward the door. Mom, when's the last time you ate? Did you have breakfast? I don't remember. Maybe just coffee. Perfect. Proof of basic self-care failure. Can't remember meals, low blood sugar, needs someone to monitor her health because she can't manage it herself. Outside the conference room, I leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Marcus stood guard, his concern genuine, even as it reinforced every assumption he'd made about my fragility. Sophia emerged with a bottle of water. Mom, drink this. You went pale in there. I sipped obediently, playing the part of someone rescued by capable children from her own inability to function. We need to get you home. And we need to have that serious conversation about your living situation. This proves you're not managing well on your own. Back inside, Morrison stood as we re-entered. Mrs. Whitmore, I've prepared some documents for you to review. Estate-related paperwork, tax forms, property documents. Why don't you take them home, look them over when you're feeling better, and we can schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss next steps. That sounds good. Thank you, Robert. He handed me a folder thick with papers. I took it with slightly trembling hands, holding it like it contained secrets I couldn't comprehend rather than documents I could have drafted myself. The drive home was silent until Sophia spoke. Mom, Marcus and I are coming in. We need to talk. No more postponing. At my house, they positioned me on the living room sofa like an invalid. Sophia made tea I hadn't asked for. Marcus spread papers on the coffee table. Not Morrison's estate documents, but their own prepared materials. Real estate listings, retirement communities with glossy brochures, financial projections showing how quickly 1.4 million would deplete if I tried to maintain the house. Mom, look at this. Harborview Senior Living. Beautiful apartments, all services included, social activities, even transportation to doctor's appointments. You'd never have to worry about maintenance or repairs or any of that. It looks like a nursing home. It's independent living, Marcus corrected. People your age living active lives but with support available. People my age. I was 62, not 80. But they'd already categorized me as elderly, declining, in need of the kind of facilities that provided support for people who couldn't support themselves. What about the house? Sophia pulled out a real estate analysis, complete with market comparisons and projected values. We had this prepared by Mom's realtor. A realtor we consulted. Current market value 1.35 to 1.45 million. We're recommending listing at 1.39, which should sell quickly. After realtor fees and closing costs, you'd net about 1.24 million. Add Dad's 200,000. You'd have 1.44 million liquid. She pushed another document toward me, a budget projection. If you buy a 2-bedroom condo at Harborview for 400,000, you'd have 1.04 million left. Invested conservatively at 4%, that generates 41,000 annually. Combined with Dad's survivor pension benefits, you'd have about 70,000 a year. More than comfortable. The math was correct, the logic sound, the presentation professional. They'd done their homework, built their case, prepared materials that would seem helpful to someone who truly didn't understand finance. What they didn't know was that I generated $41,000 in net rental income every 3.5 days, that my monthly revenue exceeded their projected annual income. I need to think about this. Mom, there's a time factor here. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes. Market conditions change, properties sit. And honestly, Sophia's voice softened, we're worried about you living here alone. What if there's another fire? What if you fall and no one finds you for hours? What if you make a financial mistake that costs you everything? What if? Hypotheticals building a case for incompetence, for need, for intervention. Marcus pulled out the document I'd been expecting, the one I'd seen in his folder days earlier. Mom, there's a legal option called guardianship. It's not what it sounds like. It's not about taking away your rights. It's about having someone legally authorized to help you with major decisions. Healthcare, finances, where to live. Amanda has drafted a petition. We're not filing it yet, but we wanted you to know it exists as an option. An option, like it was for my benefit rather than theirs. You want to have me declared incompetent? No, Mom. That's what guardianship means, doesn't it? That a court decides I can't make my own decisions? Amanda intervened, her attorney voice calm and authoritative. Guardianship can be temporary and limited in scope. It doesn't have to mean complete loss of autonomy. Given recent incidents, the fire, memory issues, difficulty with basic tasks, a court might agree that supervised decision-making is in your best interest. The process involves evaluation by medical professionals and testimony about your current capacity. They'd thought this through, built their case systematically. Fire department report, witnesses to confusion, medical records they'd started constructing through Diane's conversations with psychiatrists. I stood, the folder of estate documents slipping from my lap onto the floor. Please leave. Mom, I said leave. I needed to think alone. They gathered their materials slowly, exchanging glances that communicated volumes. Elena is getting worse. Elena is paranoid. Elena needs intervention whether she agrees or not. At the door, Marcus tried once more. We love you, Mom. We're doing this because we care. We'll give you a few days to think, but then we need a decision. about the house, about guardianship, about your future. After they left, I picked up the scattered estate documents, carried them to my home office, and spread them across the desk. Standard legal paperwork, deed transfer, tax forms, probate documents. Nothing I hadn't seen dozens of times managing my own acquisitions. I pulled out my phone and called Tom Rodriguez, the private investigator. Tom, I need deep background on Marcus Brenner. He's the attorney working with Diane on the guardianship petition. Already on it, boss. Preliminary research shows he's filed 47 guardianship petitions in the past 3 years. 39 were granted. He specializes in elder law with a focus on incapacity cases. Charges premium rates. Has a reputation for aggressive tactics. What kind of tactics? Shopping for friendly psychiatric evaluators. Coaching family members on how to document decline. Filing emergency petitions before the subject can organize defense. He's good at what he does, which makes him dangerous if you're unprepared. I'm not unprepared. I need everything you can find on him. Client complaints, bar association reviews, case outcomes. If there's a pattern of abuse or ethical violations, I want it documented. You'll have it by end of business tomorrow. I hung up and opened my laptop. Time to understand exactly what I was up against. Prestige Wealth Management's website showed a sleek professional operation. 30 years serving military families. 200 million under management. 4 staff advisors plus support personnel. Standard credentials, standard services, standard appearance of trustworthy financial institution. What the website didn't show was the ownership structure buried in Delaware corporate filings. Prestige Wealth Management was a wholly owned subsidiary of Chesapeake Investment Group, which was a subsidiary of TH Property Management, which was owned by Thompson Holdings LLC, which was owned by me. I'd acquired controlling interest 4 years ago, when Prestige was looking for capital to expand. The purchase had cost me $2.8 million, 20% down. The rest financed at favorable terms because I'd presented myself as a stable long-term investor. The owner, retiring after building the company over 3 decades, had been thrilled to find someone who wanted to maintain the business rather than strip its assets. What he hadn't known, what no one except my attorney Sarah Martinez knew, was that the buyer was a 60-year-old Navy wife with no formal business education, managing the purchase through multiple shell companies to maintain anonymity. Now, Prestige managed not just my holdings, but trusts for dozens of military families, including the one Richard had established for Sophia and Marcus, which meant I had access to every transaction, every communication, every distribution request they'd made or would make. I pulled up their trust file. The login credentials I'd set up years ago still worked. Standard access for major stakeholders, something the day-to-day managers at Prestige had approved without realizing who was actually logging in. Sophia's file showed 7 inquiries about early distribution, starting 3 months before Richard died. Hardship requests citing medical expenses that were actually credit card bills. Marcus had made 4 inquiries, carefully worded to suggest business losses rather than cryptocurrency gambling. More interesting were the communications flagged as concerning by the trust advisor. Both siblings had asked about what would happen if their mother was declared incompetent, whether that would affect trust distributions, whether a guardian could access funds on their behalf, whether assets outside the trust could be consolidated into estate management. They'd been planning this for months. The guardianship wasn't a recent decision prompted by concern. It was a strategy they developed while Richard was still alive, waiting for the right moment to execute. I saved copies of everything, encrypted the files, and backed them up to 3 separate secure servers. Evidence gathering, the kind that would matter when this went to court. Not that I planned to let it reach court. The revelation on September 7th would make legal proceedings unnecessary. My phone buzzed. Sarah Martinez. Judge Williams confirmed for September 5th competency evaluation at 0900. We'll meet you at Chesapeake Medical Group. Neuropsychological testing, financial competency assessment, and interview. Results should be available same day. Admiral Jackson and Commander Peterson both willing to testify to your capacity if needed. Perfect. What about the preemptive filing? We'll file on September 6th at 1600, proof of capacity, medical documentation, character testimony. By the time the event starts on September 7th, there will be official court record establishing that not only are you competent, but you've been managing complex financial affairs successfully for 18 years. Any guardianship petition after that becomes legally impossible. The pieces were aligning: competency documentation from unimpeachable sources, financial records proving sophisticated management, character witnesses who carried weight in Virginia courts, all filed the day before the reveal, creating legal barriers they couldn't overcome. Sarah continued, "One thing concerns me. They're moving fast. If they file their petition before we file ours, even if it's baseless, you might be dealing with emergency hearings and temporary orders. I don't think they can win, but they could create chaos that delays everything. Then we need to ensure they don't file before September 6th. How do we do that? Give them a reason to wait. Make them think you're about to do something that serves their purposes. If they believe you're close to agreeing to sell the house or moving to assisted living, they won't rush the guardianship petition. Why force legal action when persuasion might work? It was brilliant tactically. Let them think they were winning through normal channels. Keep them comfortable until the moment comfort turned to catastrophe. I'll call Sophia tomorrow. Tell her I've been thinking about Harborview Senior Living, that maybe she's right about downsizing. Keep her hopeful." Perfect. String it out until September 6th. Then we move. The next morning, I called Sophia before she could call me. "Honey, I've been thinking about what you said, about the house being too much to manage alone." Sophia's voice brightened immediately. "Mom, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm not promising anything yet, but I'd like to visit Harborview, see what it's actually like. Could you arrange a tour?" "Absolutely. Let me call them today. I can probably get us in by the end of the week." "That would be good. I need to understand all my options before making decisions." We hung up with Sophia clearly energized. She'd call Marcus immediately, tell him Mom was coming around, that gentle pressure was working, that maybe they wouldn't need the guardianship petition after all. Perfect. Let them relax. Let them think the old approach, patient persuasion, was succeeding. The Harborview tour was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I dressed in my invisible costume, dated clothes, minimal styling, the appearance of someone who'd given up on presentation. Sophia picked me up, chattering about the facility's amenities, how many Navy families lived there, how comfortable I'd be. Harborview occupied a sprawling campus in Virginia Beach, all manicured lawns and colonial revival architecture, designed to suggest both luxury and comfort. The lobby featured a grand piano, fresh flowers, and residents reading or playing cards in elegant common areas. Our tour guide, Patricia, was professionally cheerful. "We have 120 independent living units ranging from studio apartments to two-bedroom condos, all utilities included: weekly housekeeping, daily activities, transportation services, and on-site medical staff for emergencies. There's a dining room with chef-prepared meals, a fitness center, and a beautiful library." She walked us through a model unit: 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, small kitchen, about 900 square feet. Pleasant, well-appointed, and utterly depressing in its assumption that this was enough space for a life. "What do you think, Mom?" "It's nice, very clean." Patricia smiled encouragingly. "We have a lovely community here. Many residents say they wish they'd moved sooner. The social aspects alone are worth it. No more worrying about being isolated." Because isolation was now added to the list of concerns about poor Elena living alone in her big house, unable to manage, cut off from meaningful contact. "What's the monthly cost?" "For a 2-bedroom unit, $3,800 monthly. That includes everything except phone and cable. Some residents find it's actually less expensive than maintaining a house when you factor in property taxes, utilities, insurance, and repairs. $45,000 annually, more than the budget Sophia had projected, but manageable within their plan. And it would leave over $1 million liquid after the house sold. Money they expected to manage or influence. Money that represented security for both of them if they could maintain control over my decisions. "Could I see the available units? What's actually for sale right now?" Patricia pulled out listings. 3 two-bedroom units currently available, ranging from $390,000 to $420,000 depending on floor and view. I studied them carefully, asking questions about square footage and storage, and whether I could bring my own furniture. Playing the interested buyer, letting Sophia's hope grow with every question. In the car afterward, Sophia could barely contain her excitement. "Mom, I think this is perfect for you." That corner unit on the third floor, beautiful light, nice view of the courtyard. You could be so happy there. I need to think about it. It's a big change. Of course, but at least you're considering it. That's huge progress. She dropped me home and immediately, I was certain, called Marcus to report the breakthrough. Elena was looking at assisted living. Elena was asking practical questions. Elena might actually agree to sell without them having to pursue guardianship. Inside, I called Sarah Martinez. Tour completed. They think I'm seriously considering it. How long do we need to maintain this? 8 more days, Sarah confirmed. September 5th is your competency evaluation. 6th, we file documentation. 7th is the reveal. Can you keep performing until then? I've kept performing for 18 years. 8 more days is nothing. What I didn't say was how exhausting it was becoming. Not the performance itself, I'd mastered that long ago, but the constant reinforcement of their beliefs, the daily evidence building of my own incompetence, the systematic construction of a false self that everyone around me accepted as real. Each day required new demonstrations of inability. I called Sophia confused about a letter from the bank. I asked Marcus to explain what a tax assessment meant. I let Diane find me staring at Richard's checkbook like it contained hieroglyphics. Every incident got reported, discussed, used as evidence of decline. Every mistake, manufactured or real, became another piece in the narrative they were building. By September 3rd, I could feel their confidence solidifying. At a family dinner Diane hosted, they talked around me more than to me, making decisions about my future, with only token consultation. Sophia has found a wonderful unit at Harborview. Elena seems comfortable with it. We should get the house appraised this week. Be ready to list as soon as she agrees. I've contacted the attorney about estate closure procedures. Once the house sells, we can consolidate everything. I sat at the table pushing food around my plate, nodding occasionally, appearing to track conversation without fully engaging. The invisible woman at her own life's planning meeting. After dinner, Marcus pulled me aside. Mom, I know this is hard, but you're making good decisions. Dad would be proud of you. The comment landed like acid. Richard would be proud I was finally doing what he'd always wanted. Accepting guidance, acknowledging my limitations, letting others handle complexity. What Richard would never know was that his incompetent wife owned more assets than he'd accumulated in 40 years of service, generated more monthly income than he'd earned annually, and had built an empire so sophisticated his children couldn't imagine it existed. September 5th arrived, the competency evaluation. I dressed professionally, not expensive, but put together. Hair styled neatly, minimal jewelry, the appearance of someone taking the assessment seriously. Sarah Martinez met me at Chesapeake Medical Group, a private facility that handled executive evaluations and expert testimony for legal cases. We'd chosen them specifically because their reputation for thorough, unbiased assessment would make the results unimpeachable. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the neuropsychologist, was 50-something, efficient, and clearly someone who'd conducted hundreds of these evaluations. She explained the process while setting up testing materials. We'll do cognitive screening, memory assessment, executive function tests, and financial competency evaluation. The whole process takes about 3 hours. Then I'll interview you about daily living activities and decision-making capabilities. Results should be available by end of business today. The testing was rigorous. Memory games, pattern recognition, problem-solving tasks, mathematical calculations. I worked through each section carefully, not trying to show off but demonstrating clear, consistent competence. The financial evaluation was more complex. Dr. Chen presented scenarios about investments, tax implications, estate planning, property management. I answered each question thoroughly, explaining reasoning and trade-offs without simplifying. At one point, Dr. Chen looked up from her notes. Mrs. Whitmore, your understanding of financial concepts is quite sophisticated. Do you have a background in business or finance? No formal training, but I've managed household finances for 34 years. You learn through experience. The interview portion covered daily activities. Could I prepare meals, manage medications, handle household tasks, navigate transportation, maintain social connections? I answered honestly, yes to everything, because I'd been doing all of it successfully while also managing a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. Dr. Chen finished her notes and set down her pen. Mrs. Whitmore, based on this evaluation, I see no indicators of cognitive impairment, no signs of diminished capacity, and clear evidence of sophisticated understanding in multiple domains. Your memory, executive function, and judgment all test in the superior range for your age group. You're not just competent, you're performing at levels that would qualify you for complex professional work. She looked puzzled. I'm curious why this evaluation was requested. Your family has expressed concerns about your capacity. Yes, they think I'm struggling after my husband's death. If you don't mind my saying so, there's no objective evidence of struggle. You demonstrate clear thinking, excellent judgment, and thorough understanding of complex issues. I'll note that in my report, which should be available by 1700 today. Outside, Sarah was grinning. That went even better than expected. Superior range, no impairment, sophisticated understanding. They can't fight that evaluation. It's bulletproof. Tomorrow we file, I confirmed. Everything ready? Everything. Competency documentation, financial records proving complex management, character testimony from 3 admirals and a federal judge. By the time your family wakes up on September 7th, there will be a legal record establishing that you're not just competent, but exceptional. One more day of performance. One more day of letting them believe they were winning. That evening, Sophia called. Mom, great news. We have a buyer interested in pre-listing the house, a couple who drive by all the time and love the neighborhood. They're willing to pay $1.38 million cash if we can close in 30 days. I think we should seriously consider it. That's very fast. Sometimes fast is good. Gets the uncertainty over with, and you could be moved into Harborview by October. Fresh start. Let me sleep on it. This is all happening so quickly. I understand. But Mom, opportunities like this don't wait. I need an answer by tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, September 6th, the day before the reveal. I'll have an answer for you tomorrow, I promised. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room. This house Richard had bought, that he'd left me, that Sophia and Marcus now wanted to sell for a profit while installing me in assisted living. Tomorrow I would give Sophia an answer, but not the one she expected. Tomorrow Sarah would file documentation proving my competence. Tomorrow we'd finalize every detail of September 7th's event. And the day after tomorrow, at 1400 hours, in the officers' club that I owned, surrounded by witnesses and press and naval leadership, I would reveal exactly who the invisible wife had been all along. They thought silence meant nothing. They were about to learn that silence was reconnaissance, patience was strategy, and invisibility was the most powerful position of all, right up until the moment you chose to be seen. September 6th arrived with the clarity of a mission briefing. I woke at 0500, Navy habits overriding civilian life, and went through my morning routine with the precision of someone preparing for combat. Because that's what today was. Preparation for tomorrow's battlefield. At 0800, Sarah Martinez called. Filing in 4 hours. Everything's prepared. Competency evaluation from Dr. Chen, financial documentation, showing 18 years of sophisticated property management, character testimony from Admiral Jackson, Commander Peterson, and Federal Judge Williams. By 1630, there will be official court record that you're not just competent, but have been successfully managing complex business operations, while your family assumed you were struggling with basic tasks. Any chance they'll find out before tomorrow? 0. These filings go into the system but don't trigger notifications. Unless they're actively monitoring court records today, which they won't be because they think they're winning, they'll have no idea until it's too late to respond. What about the event tomorrow? Confirmed. 247 guests, including 18 active duty admirals, local business leaders, and press from Greenwich Time and Virginia Pilot. They think they're covering a naval history tribute. They're about to get the story of the year. I spent the morning reviewing documents, not the estate paperwork Morrison had given me. I'd memorized that already. Instead, I studied every property in my portfolio, every revenue stream, every piece of evidence that would demonstrate exactly what I'd built, while everyone assumed I was shopping at Target and volunteering at the library. 73 properties across 6 states, $31.8 million in net worth, monthly revenue averaging $427,000. All of it documented, verified. Impossible to dismiss as exaggeration or mistake. At noon, my phone rang. Sophia. Mom, I need your answer about the house. The buyers are serious, but they want commitment today. $1.38 million cash. 30-day close. It's an incredible offer. Her voice carried the edge of someone trying to sound patient while feeling desperate. She needed this sale, needed the money to become liquid so she could clear her debts before James served divorce papers, needed me to agree before I had time to think or consult anyone who might tell me the offer was low. I've been thinking about it, about everything, the house, Harborview, what comes next. And I need to talk to you and Marcus together, tomorrow. Can you both come to the Officers Club event? We can discuss it after. The event is just a Navy tribute thing, Mom. Seems like weird timing. Please, it's important to me. Your father's birthday. I want us to be together, and then we can talk about the house and my decision. Silence. While she calculated. An event with Navy brass and local press wasn't the private setting she'd prefer for discussing my future. But if I was ready to make decisions, she couldn't risk waiting longer. Okay, we'll be there. 2 o'clock? 1400 hours. We hung up. The trap was set. They'd come expecting a memorial tribute and an opportunity to finalize my agreement to sell. They'd get something else entirely. At 1600 hours, Sarah texted, filed. Documentation is official. You're legally established as competent with evidence of sophisticated financial management. Guardianship petition is now impossible. I texted back, tomorrow we show them why. That evening, I laid out my clothing for the next day. Not the clearance rack black dress or the dated suit from Macy's. Instead, a custom-tailored Navy suit I'd purchased 3 years ago and never worn, $800 from a small tailoring shop in Baltimore, where the seamstress knew me as Mrs. Thompson, property owner, not Mrs. Whitmore, Navy widow. Silk blouse, professional heels that added 2 inches, real pearl earrings I'd bought myself, not the fake ones Richard's mother had given me. A leather portfolio case, reading glasses with designer frames. The transformation wasn't about becoming someone different. It was about revealing who I'd been all along underneath the performance. I set my alarm for 0600 and went to bed early. Tomorrow would require energy, focus, absolute precision in timing and delivery. Tomorrow I would walk into that building, my building, and dismantle 18 years of invisibility in front of everyone who'd benefited from not seeing me clearly. Sleep came easier than expected. Perhaps because after 18 years of living one life while hiding another, the prospect of finally telling the truth felt like relief. September 7th, Richard's birthday. He would have been 69. I dressed with military attention to detail. The Navy suit fit perfectly, tailored to suggest authority without ostentation. Hair professionally styled the day before. Gray streaked through brown, but managed rather than hidden. Makeup applied with care. Not heavy, but enough to define features that usually disappeared into the background. The pearl earrings caught light when I moved. The portfolio contained documents that would change everything. At 1100, Linda Chen called. Boss, all properties reporting normal. Revenue on track. Occupancy at 96.4%. Everything's steady. Good. After today, things might get complicated. Media attention, family drama, possible challenges. I need you prepared. We've handled complicated before. The portfolio is solid. Documentation is airtight. You've built this exactly right. They can't take it apart even if they try. After today, they'll know who they're dealing with. About damn time. Linda's voice carried satisfaction. 18 years watching you play diminished. 18 years knowing what you really are. I'm glad you're finally showing them. At noon, I drove to Newport in my Honda Civic. Same old car, same invisible vehicle, but the woman driving it was no longer invisible. The contrast would be part of the impact. They'd see me arrive in the same modest car they'd always dismissed, then watch as I revealed I could buy 100 cars like Marcus's Mercedes without affecting my net worth. The Officers Club parking lot was already filling. Navy vehicles, luxury sedans, press vans setting up equipment. Sarah Martinez waited by the entrance, dressed in her marine dress blues despite being retired. She'd earned the right to wear them, and today they served as visual reminder of who I'd been before I'd become invisible. Admiral Jackson is ready. He knows what to expect, and he's furious on your behalf. Judge Williams is seated front row. Press is positioned with clear sightlines to the stage. Your family just arrived. Marcus's Mercedes is in the south lot. I checked my watch. 13:45 hours, 15 minutes until start time. Let's go. Inside, the main hall had been transformed from memorial reception space into formal presentation venue. Stage at the front with projection screen. Rows of chairs nearly full. A podium with microphone. Navy flags flanking the stage. Everything looking official and proper for what was supposed to be a historical tribute. Sophia spotted me immediately, and her expression flickered. Surprise, confusion, quick recalculation. I looked different, put together, professional, not the confused widow in clearance rack clothing. Mom, you look nice, different. Thank you, honey. Marcus appeared, his lawyer instinct sensing something off. He studied my outfit, my bearing, the portfolio I carried. Mom, what's going on? You said we'd talk about the house. This seems formal. It is formal. You'll understand soon. Diane materialized, her assessment more direct. Elena, what's this about? Why drag us to a Navy event to discuss your living situation? Because this isn't about my living situation. This is about truth. Before they could respond, Admiral Jackson took the podium. The room quieted immediately. 3-star admirals commanded attention without asking for it. Good afternoon. Thank you all for attending today's presentation. We're here to honor Admiral Richard Whitmore's legacy and to discuss an important piece of naval history. But we're also here for something else. Something that needs to be said publicly and officially. Jackson's eyes found mine in the crowd. He nodded once. We're here because someone in this room has been profoundly underestimated. Someone who served this Navy with distinction, who sacrificed a promising career, who spent decades being invisible while quietly building something extraordinary. Mrs. Elena Whitmore, would you join me on stage, please? The room went silent. Sophia's hand gripped my arm. Mom, what is this? I pulled free gently and walked to the stage, each step feeling like shedding layers of costume. The invisible wife walking toward visibility. The incompetent widow about to demonstrate competence. The woman they'd planned to control revealing she'd been in control all along. Jackson handed me the microphone and stepped aside. 247 people waited. Sophia, Marcus, and Diane sat frozen in the third row, confusion shifting toward alarm. I adjusted the microphone, looked out at faces ranging from curious to concerned, and began. My name is Elena Whitmore. Some of you know me as Admiral Whitmore's wife, the quiet one, the one who didn't quite fit in at Navy functions, the one who shopped at thrift stores and drove an old car and seemed content with modest circumstances. I paused, letting them remember their assumptions. Others of you don't know me at all, even though we've done business together. I'm also known as E. Thompson, principal of Thompson Holdings, LLC, as the majority stakeholder in Chesapeake Investment Group, as the owner of TH Property Management. Under those names, I've worked with many of you, purchased properties, negotiated contracts, managed investments. You just didn't know the principal was a 62-year-old Navy wife. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sophia's face had gone white. Marcus was leaning forward like he'd misheard. I touched a button on the remote control Sarah had given me. The projection screen illuminated with my property portfolio. Addresses, purchase dates, current values, all displayed in neat rows. For the past 18 years, I've been building a real estate empire. 73 properties across Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Florida, and North Carolina. Residential rentals, apartment buildings, commercial spaces, mixed-use developments, boutique hotels. Current portfolio value, $52.3 million. Net worth after mortgages and loans, $31.8 million. Monthly revenue, $427,000. The numbers hung in the air, impossible to dismiss or rationalize away. Someone in the back stood to see the screen better. Press cameras were recording every moment. I built this from nothing. From household allowances my husband gave me, $400 a week for groceries and household expenses. From selling clothes on eBay, from tutoring officers' children, from every dollar I could save by shopping at clearance racks and driving a car with 200,000 miles. I took that money and I invested it. And then I reinvested the profits. And I kept doing that for 18 years, while everyone around me assumed I was simple, unsophisticated, someone who didn't understand complicated financial matters. My voice stayed level, factual, letting the information speak for itself. Some of you are wondering why I kept this secret, why I let my husband believe I was dependent on him, why I let my family think I needed their guidance and protection. I advanced the slides, images of properties I owned, the duplex in Baltimore where I'd started, apartment buildings in Richmond, the hotel in Annapolis, and finally, the building we were standing in? The answer is simple. I wanted to see what people would do when they thought I was powerless. I wanted to watch how they treated someone they perceived as weak, confused, incompetent, and what I learned was clarifying. Another slide. This one showed Richard's will, the section leaving me 1.6 million, while describing me as someone who needed protection from financial complexity. My husband, who I loved despite everything, left me what he thought was generous provision for a woman who couldn't manage money. He wrote in his will that I'd never worked, never understood investments, needed guidance to make appropriate decisions. He was so certain of my limitations that he built legal structures to ensure other people would control my finances after his death. I looked directly at Sophia and Marcus, and my stepchildren, who I raised from early childhood, decided I needed to be declared legally incompetent. They've been working with an attorney who specializes in guardianship cases, building medical evidence of my decline, documenting my confusion and memory problems. They plan to sell my house, take control of my assets, and move me into assisted living where I could be monitored. Sophia stood abruptly. We were trying to help you. Help me or help yourselves. New slides appeared. Financial records showing Sophia's credit card debt, Marcus's cryptocurrency losses, Diane's meetings with guardianship attorneys. You needed money. All of you. Sophia, you're $340,000 in debt. Marcus, you lost over $400,000 in bad investments, and you're being audited by the IRS. Diane, Richard's will left you nothing, and you've been living rent-free for 36 years. You all needed my inheritance to solve your financial problems. The guardianship wasn't about protecting me. It was about accessing assets you thought I couldn't manage. The room had gone completely silent. Even the press had stopped adjusting their cameras, transfixed by the revelation unfolding. But here's what none of you knew. Here's what I've been waiting 18 years to reveal. The final slide appeared. Corporate structure charts showing the ownership chain from Thompson Holdings through TH Property Management to Chesapeake Investment Group to Prestige Wealth Management. Prestige Wealth Management, the company managing the trust Richard set up for Sophia and Marcus, is owned by Chesapeake Investment Group, which is owned by TH Property Management, which is owned by Thompson Holdings, which is owned by me. I control 68% of Prestige Wealth Management. I have for the past 4 years. Marcus made it sound like he'd been hit. That's impossible. It's documented. Sarah Martinez, would you present the ownership records? Sarah walked to the podium with a file folder. She placed certified copies of corporate filings on the display table, each one showing the ownership chain clearly. Which means, I continued, that I've had access to every communication you've made with your trust advisor, every request for early distribution, every inquiry about what would happen if your mother was declared incompetent, every calculation about how to access your inheritance faster. I've read it all. Sophia, I know you asked about hardship distributions 7 times, claiming medical expenses that were actually credit card bills. Marcus, I know you inquired about whether a guardian could authorize trust withdrawals on my behalf. You were planning to use guardianship not just to control my assets, but to access your own inheritance early. Diane was shaking her head, her composure finally cracking. This is insane. You've been lying to everyone for 18 years. I've been surviving, Diane. There's a difference. I gave up my naval career to raise children who weren't mine. I spent 34 years being told I didn't understand money. I watched my husband plan his estate as if I were a child who needed supervision. And when he died, instead of respecting my grief, you all immediately started planning how to take control of everything I supposedly couldn't manage. I turned to address the entire room. I'm telling you this publicly because it needs to be public. Because too many women my age are being told they're incompetent when they're not. Too many widows are being pushed into guardianship by family members who claim to care while actually positioning themselves to control assets. Too many of us are invisible not because we lack capability, but because it's convenient for other people if we disappear. Judge Williams stood in the front row. Mrs. Whitmore, as you know, I reviewed your competency evaluation yesterday. Dr. Rebecca Chen's assessment states, and I quote, superior cognitive function, sophisticated understanding of complex financial matters, no indicators of impairment or diminished capacity. Your performance on financial competency testing exceeded standards for professional finance positions. The court has accepted this evaluation as official record. He turned to face the room. Any petition for guardianship filed against Mrs. Whitmore will be denied. The evidence of her capacity is overwhelming, and her financial management over 18 years speaks for itself. She is not only competent, she is exceptional. Admiral Jackson returned to the podium. I've known Elena Whitmore since she was Lieutenant Thompson, a surface warfare officer with one of the best service records in her class. She gave up her career for family. That was her choice. But she never stopped being the strategic thinker, the disciplined planner, the person capable of complex operations that the Navy trained her to be. She just did it invisibly. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most impressive demonstrations of long-term strategic planning I've seen in 40 years of military service. The room erupted, press shouting questions, guests talking over each other, people standing to see better. Sophia was crying, her face buried in her hands. Marcus looked like he'd been physically struck, his lawyer mind trying to process implications and finding only catastrophic conclusions. Diane had collapsed back into her chair, everything she'd counted on. Guardianship, control, financial security, disintegrating in real time. I held up a hand for quiet. Eventually, the room settled. I'm not telling you this for revenge. I'm telling you because visibility matters. Because there are hundreds of women like me who've been told they're not capable of understanding finance, managing property, making complex decisions. Women who've been made invisible by assumption and convenience. Women who are being targeted for guardianship by family members, who see them as obstacles to inheritance, rather than people deserving respect. I set down the microphone and picked up my portfolio, pulling out a document. As of this morning, I've established the Visibility Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to financial literacy for women over 50, particularly military spouses and widows. We'll provide education, legal support, and advocacy for women facing inappropriate guardianship proceedings. The foundation is funded with an initial endowment of $5 million from my personal assets. Sarah Martinez will serve as executive director. Sarah joined me on stage, accepting the folder I handed her. We'll also be investigating Marcus Brenner, the attorney who is building the guardianship case against me. Our research suggests he's filed 47 such petitions in 3 years, many against elderly women with family members who stood to inherit. We believe there's a pattern of abuse that needs legal scrutiny. Marcus Brenner, sitting in the back row, stood and walked out. The story was already spreading. Within hours, his practice would be under investigation, his methods questioned, his reputation destroyed. I returned to the microphone for my final statement. To my stepchildren, I don't hate you, but I'm profoundly disappointed. You had a mother who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who never asked for credit or recognition. And when she was vulnerable, you saw opportunity rather than obligation. You'll still receive your inheritance from your father's trust. I'm not vindictive enough to interfere with that. But you'll receive it under the original terms, when you turn 40 or qualify for legitimate hardship. And you'll receive it knowing that the woman you tried to control was always 10 steps ahead. Sophia was sobbing openly now. Marcus stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. To Diane, Richard's will left you nothing because you were never family, only someone who lived off his generosity. You tried to turn my grief into your opportunity. You'll need to vacate the guest house by the end of the month. I'm selling the property, not because I need money, but because I don't want you there. Diane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The security she'd taken for granted for 36 years had just evaporated. To everyone else, I'm sharing this story because someone needs to say what we all know but don't acknowledge. That capability doesn't always look like what we expect. That quiet doesn't mean stupid. That invisible doesn't mean powerless. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones you've stopped noticing. I gathered my materials and stepped away from the podium. Admiral Jackson shook my hand, the gesture formal and respectful, military recognition of an operation well executed. Press surged forward with questions, but Sarah intercepted them, providing prepared statements and contact information. I walked down the center aisle toward the exit. People stood as I passed, some applauding, others just watching this woman they'd never really seen before, finally demanding to be visible. At the doorway, Sophia caught up with me, mascara streaking her face. Mom, please, can we talk? I'm so sorry. We were wrong. We were so wrong. Her remorse seemed genuine, born from shock and shame, and the sudden understanding that she'd catastrophically misjudged someone who'd spent decades caring for her. Not today, Sophia. I need time. You need to think about who you've become. Maybe in 6 months, maybe a year, we can have a conversation, but right now, I have nothing left to give you. Marcus appeared beside his sister, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Everything we did, trying to help, the guardianship, all of it. We really thought you needed us. Then you weren't paying attention. For 34 years, you weren't paying attention. And that's something you need to examine in yourself. I walked to my Honda Civic, got in, and drove away from my own triumph. Because that's what it was, really, a triumph over assumption, over invisibility, over being told for decades that I wasn't capable of understanding my own life. The story broke nationally within hours. Virginia Pilot ran it front page. Navy widow reveals secret 52 Amnina empire while family sought guardianship. Greenwich Times headline, The Invisible Entrepreneur, How One Woman Built an Empire in Silence. By evening, it was trending on social media, picked up by national outlets, debated on cable news. The phone calls started immediately. Interview requests from morning shows, financial magazines, women's organizations, book publishers wanting memoir rights, documentary filmmakers proposing projects. Everyone suddenly fascinated by the invisible woman who'd been hiding in plain sight. Sarah fielded them while I sat in my home office, Richard's old study, my command center for 18 years, and processed what I'd done. Linda Chen called. Boss, you're famous. Properties are fine. Tenants don't care. But media has been calling the management office. How do you want me to handle? Standard response. Thompson Holdings, LLC maintains privacy for its principal. No additional information available. Keep the business separate from the story. Smart. How are you doing? Honestly, I don't know yet. This was the goal for 18 years. Now I'm trying to figure out what comes next. What comes next is you stop performing, stop being invisible, stop pretending you're less than what you are. That's what comes next. Over the following days, the fallout continued. Sophia and Marcus issued a public apology through their attorneys, carefully worded to express regret without admitting legal liability. Diane moved out of the guest house quietly, relocating to Florida where Richard's sister lived. Marcus Brenner's law practice came under investigation by the Virginia State Bar, with 3 former clients filing complaints about coercive guardianship tactics. The Visibility Foundation received hundreds of applications in its first week. Women seeking legal help to fight inappropriate guardianship proceedings, widows who'd been told they couldn't manage finances, military spouses who'd given up careers and wanted guidance rebuilding. Sarah assembled a team of attorneys, accountants, and advocates. Within 2 months, we'd prevented 6 guardianship cases and provided financial education to 200 women. I sold the Arlington house for $1.45 million, more than Richard had estimated, more than Sophia and Marcus had been willing to pay under right of first refusal. I didn't offer it to them. They'd lost that privilege when they tried to force me out. I bought a condo in Alexandria overlooking the Potomac. Smaller space, but mine by choice rather than inheritance. Decorated it myself with furniture I actually liked, rather than pieces that had belonged to Richard's family. Hung artwork from local galleries instead of maritime paintings, chosen to impress Navy colleagues. 3 months after the reveal, Sophia requested a meeting. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Georgetown where neither of us had history. She looked thinner, tired, like someone who'd been forced to examine themselves and hadn't liked what they found. I've been in therapy, trying to understand how I became someone who'd do what I did to you. The debt, the pressure, James leaving, those are reasons, not excuses. I knew better, and I did it anyway. I appreciated the honesty. Not enough to forgive immediately, but enough to listen. I thought you were weak, she continued. I genuinely believed you needed protection. And under that belief, I convinced myself that taking control was helping rather than stealing. I was so focused on my own problems, I couldn't see that you might have a whole life I knew nothing about. Why didn't you just ask? In 34 years, why didn't anyone ask what I wanted, what I was capable of, what I'd been doing with my time? Because we didn't think you were interesting enough to ask. And that's the truth I'm trying to live with. I dismissed you so completely I never imagined there was anything to discover. We talked for 2 hours. Not reconciliation, but beginning of understanding. Sophia had lost her marriage, damaged her career, spent 3 months excavating the entitlement and assumptions that had led her to see her mother as an obstacle. Growth was painful, necessary, but painful. Marcus came separately weeks later. His confession was more analytical, lawyer processing how he'd failed to see evidence right in front of him. I keep thinking about all the signs, you being gone during the day, those library volunteer hours that didn't quite add up, the way you knew random details about real estate markets. I dismissed everything that didn't fit my narrative of who you were, because the narrative was convenient. If I was incompetent, you didn't have to worry about whether treating me like a child was appropriate. He nodded slowly. Dad modeled it. The way he talked about you, talked to you. We learned from watching him that you were someone who needed managing rather than someone who had agency. We never questioned it. Your father loved me in his way, but he never trusted me with complexity. And eventually I realized that asking for trust was useless. I needed to prove I didn't need it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just want you to know I understand what we did. And I'm working on being someone who would never do it again. Time would tell if any of them actually changed. Therapy and understanding didn't erase damage, but they were at least confronting their assumptions, which was more than Richard had ever done. 6 months after the reveal, I stood in the conference room of Thompson Holdings' new office space. Real office, not home operation, with staff and conference tables and a view of the Chesapeake. Linda Chen had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer. Sarah Martinez ran the Visibility Foundation from adjacent space. We'd brought on a CFO, a director of acquisitions, and 3 property managers. The business was no longer invisible, neither was I. But the most satisfying moment came from unexpected places. Letters from women who'd heard the story, elderly widows who'd been told they couldn't manage finances, military spouses who'd given up careers, daughters watching their mothers be dismissed. All of them writing to say, "Thank you for proving that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Thank you for showing that quiet can be strategic. Thank you for refusing to accept other people's assessment of your limitations." Those letters covered my office wall, evidence that the performance had ended and something more important had begun. Not just my visibility, but permission for others to claim theirs. One letter stood out, from a 74-year-old woman in North Carolina. "My son tried to have me declared incompetent last year. I read about you and hired a lawyer from your foundation. We fought the guardianship and won. Yesterday, I enrolled in a real estate course. I'm going to do what you did, build something they can't take away. Thank you for showing me it's possible." That was the point, really. Not revenge on my family, though there'd been satisfaction in revealing their assumptions. Not wealth accumulation, though the empire was real and substantial. The point was demonstrating that the stories we're told about our limitations are often just other people's comfort speaking. Richard had needed to believe I was simple so he could feel protective rather than threatened. Sophia and Marcus had needed to believe I was incompetent so they could justify control. Diane had needed to believe I was manageable so she could position herself as necessary. Everyone had needed me to be less than I was, because anything else would have required them to treat me differently. I'd spent 18 years letting them believe what they needed to believe while building proof they were wrong. And when the proof was undeniable, when the evidence was overwhelming, when there was no room left for doubt or rationalization, I'd showed them who'd been in control all along. Not the invisible wife, not the helpless widow, not the woman who needed protection from financial complexity. Commander Elena Whitmore, strategic thinker, long-term planner, builder of empires that operated in plain sight while everyone was looking somewhere else. A year after the reveal, I stood in the officers' club, still mine, though everyone knew it now, for a Visibility Foundation event. 300 women filled the hall, learning about financial literacy, property investment, protecting themselves from inappropriate guardianship. Sarah ran the program with military efficiency. Linda taught a session on property management. I gave the closing remarks. People asked me how I did it, how I built a $52 million empire while everyone thought I was shopping at Target. The answer is simple. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped asking to be taken seriously. I stopped trying to prove I understood things and just went out and did them. Invisibility became my advantage because no one watches someone they've dismissed. And by the time they realize they should have been paying attention, I'd built something they couldn't take away no matter how hard they tried. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered more were the faces. Women of all ages who'd been told they were too old, too uneducated, too dependent, too late. All of them hearing that those assessments were lies, that capability didn't have an expiration date, that quiet could be cover for building rather than evidence of emptying. After the event, I stood alone in the hall where the portrait still hung. The one with Richard at center, Sophia and Marcus flanking him, and me barely visible in the background. I'd left it up deliberately. Reminder of what people saw when they weren't really looking. But now there was a second portrait beside it, commissioned by Admiral Jackson, presented at the Foundation's launch. This one showed me in my naval uniform from 36 years ago. Lieutenant Junior Grade Elena Thompson, surface warfare officer, before I'd become the invisible wife. Young, capable, confident. The person I'd been before I'd learned to disappear. The contrast between portraits told the whole story. What I'd been, what they'd made me, and what I'd built while pretending to be diminished. Sophia had asked, during one of our careful reconciliation meetings, whether I regretted the 18 years of secrecy, whether I wished I'd revealed my capability earlier, claimed visibility sooner, demanded respect when Richard was still alive. The answer was complicated. Regret suggested wasted time, but the time hadn't been wasted. It had been invested. 18 years of disciplined accumulation, strategic planning, building foundations that couldn't be shaken. 18 years of watching and learning how people treated someone they perceived as powerless. 18 years gathering evidence of exactly who everyone was when they thought no one important was watching. If I'd claimed visibility earlier, I would have had to fight different battles. Richard would have felt threatened. Sophia and Marcus would have resented competition for his attention and resources. Diane would have worked to undermine me as rival rather than dismissing me as negligible. The Navy community would have judged me for ambition instead of applauding my sacrifice. Invisibility had been armor, protection, while I built something too substantial to tear down. By the time I revealed myself, the empire was established, documented, undeniable. They couldn't diminish what I'd accomplished because the numbers didn't care about their opinions. Was it worth it? Worth 34 years of being underestimated? Standing in that hall, looking at two portraits showing who I'd been and who I'd become, with 300 women behind me who'd learned they didn't have to accept others' assessments of their limitations, I decided yes, worth it. Every confused performance, every dismissive comment, every time someone explained simple concepts to me like I'd never heard them before. All worth it to reach this moment where quiet had transformed into thunder. Because that's what they'd never understood about silence. They'd mistaken it for nothing, for absence, emptiness, lack. But silence is reconnaissance. Silence is strategy. Silence is power waiting for exactly the right moment to speak. And when it speaks undeniably. I turned away from the portraits and walked toward the exit where my Honda Civic still waited. Same car, different driver. Or maybe the same driver, just finally visible. Finally done performing. Finally claiming the space I'd occupied all along but had let others pretend was empty. The invisible empire wasn't invisible anymore. But it had never actually been invisible, just unobserved. There's a difference. One suggests hiding. The other suggests people not bothering to look. I'd spent 18 years teaching one lesson: pay attention. Not to what people claim about themselves, but to what they actually do when no one's watching. Not to appearances, but to evidence. Not to assumptions, but to truth. They'd assumed I was powerless. The truth was I'd been powerful all along, just patient about demonstrating it. And patience, I'd learned, was the most devastating weapon of all.